Good afternoon and welcome to Valley Views. I'm your host, Glenn Edison, and it's certainly glad to have you. And as always, we want to thank BTC Fiber for hosting our program. And you can see these interviews on BTC Fiber's YouTube page as well as BTC Fiber's Channel 18. And today we have with us Ted Engel, and he's a candidate for the Public Defender's Office of the 12th Judicial District. So Ted, it's good to have you.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Glenn.
And since maybe a lot of people may not know exactly who you are, I mean, I know you've been around and introducing yourself, but let's give them a little background on who you are.
Well, my name's Ted Engel. I'm from Ray County. I'm a lifelong Republican running for public defender. Grew up in Ray County, born and raised there. I'm married to a Ray County girl. Her name's Ashley. We have a little boy named Theodore. I went to Ray County High School, graduated from Ray County High School. I actually met my wife in the library of Ray County High School when we were 14 years old. And went to school at Tennessee Tech, got a degree in political science, then went to law school at the University of Tennessee College of Law, graduated from there, and then went back to Dayton and spent about a year and a half in private practice there and got a job at the Public Defender's Office in Chattanooga. So I've been working down there since 2013 as an assistant public defender, trying cases to judges, trying cases to juries, generally just doing in a lot of ways the job I'm running for.
Yeah. Well, now, being a public defender now, as we like to say on television, when you see those programs, you have a right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one will be appointed for you. That's what you do.
That's right. And actually, if you were to go into a criminal docket in, say, General Sessions Court here in Dunlap or Circuit Court here in Dunlap, if you were to sit and watch, you'd find probably, depending on the day, somewhere between 60 and 80% of the folks that come in there can't afford their own lawyer, and they're represented by the Public Defender's Office or an appointed private lawyer.
Now, in a Public Defender's Office, you have to be ready for just about any type of case, whether it be DUI or even at worst case scenario, maybe a murder.
That's right. You know, we never know what we're going to get. It's kind of a little bit exciting sometimes. You walk in just see what you have, because you just never know. I mean, I have personally handled everything from speeding tickets all the way up to first degree murder cases. And
with that, you have to stay on top of things as far as the law, because I know the law sometimes changes from year to year. The legislature adds things or takes things away, and
that's right. It changes pretty much every year. Something changes, and especially, there are certain areas of the law that where changes are very frequent, and the legislature will come and they'll rewrite the statute, and then it'll be rewritten again within just a couple years. And so we spend a lot of time keeping up on that, staying current, making sure the stuff we handle every day, things like Walmart thefts, things like that. You get those statutes more or less memorized, but there's other things you just don't handle that often, and so you always make sure you go back and pull the statute and look at it and make sure you haven't forgotten anything or nothing's changed when you have one of those kind of cases.
Right, and I know I guess it's just waiting for the governor's signature. The Tennessee legislature just passed if you kill a parent in a DUI, you pay child support.
That's right.
And that'll be interesting.
They passed a few things. They've got that. There's a new truth in sentencing bill that just passed. It's going to have some significant changes in the way sentences are calculated for felonies. And so that's just an example of the kind of things we have to stay current on when they happen.
Right, and I'm sure there's challenges to all those laws from time to time, right?
That's right.
Yeah, even though you may have everything you think down pat, then there's someone that throws a kink and says, well, hey, let's look at it this way.
As a public defender, sometimes you'll find stuff where there's a good little thing that's helpful to you in the law, and usually the legislature figures that out sooner or later and fixes that. So, but things are constantly changing, and so we have to stay current on that.
So now you've been an attorney for how long now?
Well, a little over 10 years.
A little over 10 years. Mm-hmm. And I know you said you were in the Chattanooga area with public defender. What made you decide you wanted to run for this office?
Well, I'm from Ray County. I live in Dayton. I commute down to Chattanooga each day. And, working in the public defender's office down there, I figure I personally touch about 1,000 cases each year. So you get a lot of experience really fast when you're dealing with that quantity of cases. And for the past few years, I've been a supervisor in that office. So I've got a team of attorneys I manage, and we coordinate coverage for 10 different courts throughout Hamilton County, General Sessions Court, municipal courts, and I've also been heavily involved in our drug court we have down there. We have two drug courts, a felony and drug court like we have here in the 12th district, and we also have a misdemeanor drug court, which we don't have here in the 12th district. And I was involved in founding that misdemeanor court and setting it up, and I'm still the public defender's representative on that court. And what made me really want to run for this office is, the public defender's office is not a very well-known government position, but it does a very important job.
Right.
And really, what makes that office so special, it's the only office in our government whose entire purpose is to try to keep the government from doing things the government wants to do. And I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican, I'm somebody who believes very strongly in small government, in the dangers of big government. And that makes me particularly passionate about this office, that this office fills that role and really stands kind of in the gap to protect people's constitutional rights. So you asked what made me want to run for that office. It's kind of the mixture of those two things, of the experience and skills I developed down in Chattanooga doing this job in a very high-paced, high-stress environment. And combine that together with my passion. I want to take this experience that I've gained and bring it home and put that to work here.
Excuse me. Well, unless someone's actually been to court and seen the process, all they see a lot of times is what's on television, these big major cases across the country. And if they don't go their way, they just think that the court system and the law and the police are all out to get people, So there's a lot to a court case.
That's right. And the interesting thing about it is the entire legal profession is experiencing something that's kind of known as the disappearing jury trial. I've heard it referred to as. And that is, if you were to go in and take 100 cases that start with an arrest, you might see one of those cases actually go all the way through to a jury trial. Maybe not even one. I mean, jury trials, they're not rare, but they're becoming increasingly uncommon. But the thing is, when you got that case, when you first hold it in your hands, when you first touch that case, you don't know. You don't know if that case is going to develop into something that goes all the way through to being argued in front of a jury or not. So you have to really treat every case as if it is that complex case like you see on television.
Right.
It may not be so high profile, may not involve anybody famous. It may involve something that in the grand scheme of things seems kind of minor, but the process is the same. Going from arrest all the way through a jury trial, the process is the same. And so we really try to approach each case as if it's going to have all that work done on it so that we do make the right decisions early on in the case.
Right. Innocent until proven guilty.
Innocent until proven guilty. And that's the thing is, you just never know. I wasn't there. I don't know. So we have to treat every case. I take that presumption very seriously. And so I treat every case as if it's going to a trial.
Right, because well, as we all know, some people will tell you they didn't do it all day long, but when they did, and you just have to use the evidence that you have.
And that's really one of the things that makes our justice system so special, is that presumption of innocence, that when you walk in, if you've been arrested, doesn't matter what it's for, you're still cloaked in that presumption of innocence, and we have all these safeguards in place to try to keep innocent people from ever going into prison. Now, our system isn't perfect, but I tend to think it's the best in the world in that regard.
Right, and because there's so many cases, as we've mentioned, that maybe what you see is part of a clip from somebody's cell phone, and you think, well, that's wrong, but then you didn't see the 10, 15 minutes beforehand and the 10 or 15 minutes after.
That's right, and that's really one of the most important jobs of a defense lawyer, of a public defender or a private defense lawyer, that is to look at a case and find everything you can. And to make sure, you get a police report and it looks really bad, and that may be the entire story, but it may not be the entire story. And so part of what we do, and part of the important part of our job, is to go out and make sure that jury sees the complete picture.
Right. And
make sure that if there is something that says, well, maybe it didn't quite happen this way, that the jury hears about that.
Well, now with technology, there's the cameras on the poles, the traffic cameras, of course the cameras that officers wear. You've got then people with Facebook and all that. They'll come in there, and that's not always the truth on the Facebook, but
sure.
You see that, and then you have 911 calls that you can. So there's a lot of things that you can pull from now that you didn't used to have.
I'll tell you something that's increasingly we're getting is body-worn cameras. The police officers have a body camera, and I've got a case I'm working on right now where there were several different officers respond to an emergency, 20 or 30 officers. Each one of them had a body camera. So that creates 20 or 30 hours of video. If they stayed on scene for an hour, we get an hour of body camera footage from that. And all that has to be reviewed just to make sure that there might be something in there that's important, even when at first glance maybe there wasn't. So that you're right. With today's technology, there is a ton of evidence potentially in every case.
Right, and so it's not like the used to where you just had the notepad and you had all your questions and evidence on the notepad. Now you've got a lot of other things.
That's right.
That come into play. Well, with the justice system the way it is, as you mentioned, it's probably one of the best in the world. I'm sure you've seen cases, maybe even lost some cases that you thought you were right, and of course I know you would think you were right, but as a public defender, but there's cases out there where everybody don't see it that way.
That's right. I tell you, for me, and I don't have any illusions about sometimes sometimes we have to do our job even though we kind of have an idea of what the score is, you know what I mean? But
yeah.
But for the things that's frustrating with me is I do sometimes see people that enter into plea agreements in cases, which is how most cases do resolve. The vast majority, in fact, resolve that way, a negotiated settlement with the state. And sometimes you do see people that will plead guilty to something that they didn't do, or that you really feel strongly they didn't do. But it's because in a lot of cases, and I know this is frustrating for all sides, for victims of crimes, for witnesses, and for defendants, that these cases in many instances move so slowly through the justice system that folks just want them over with.
Yes.
And that's really something I'm hyper aware of, and I want to be hyper aware of should I have the chance to serve in this office, is moving cases through efficiently and quickly so that justice is done and people aren't making decisions with an eye just toward getting the case over with.
Right.
That's something I feel very strongly about.
Now, you probably see your number of cases involving the drug situation, and what are some things in the public defender's office you'd like to see that maybe that's not there now, that's because of funding or whatever?
Well, I think I touched a little bit earlier on drug court. We do have a drug court. We have a great drug court in the 12th District. It's right out of Franklin County. I would like to see more resources, though, for people that are earlier in the criminal justice system. And what I mean by that is, in order to qualify for the drug court we have now, you have to be in court and facing, essentially, in danger of going to prison on a felony charge. Mm-hmm. Most people don't start out that way. Most people who are addicted to a controlled substance, they come in and they start amassing a criminal record because they're stealing to support a habit or getting caught with drugs, small amounts of drugs, and so they get convicted of a misdemeanor, and then another misdemeanor, and then another misdemeanor. And so the folks, in a lot of cases, before they get into circuit court where they would risk going to prison on a felony, have amassed in many cases quite a bit of a misdemeanor record. And I would like to see more resources available early in that process to try to divert people out of the criminal justice system and get them into treatment. Now, there are some things out there, but a lot of these are faith-based programs, which are wonderful, but they're not for everybody.
Right.
Some people just don't do well in that environment. Some people do, and if they do, that's wonderful. I'm personally a religious person, and so I would hope everybody would do well in that environment. We can't approach it that way. This is a government office. The court system is a government-run entity. So I would like to see perhaps some more structured resources that way, sort of like what I was involved in putting together down in Chattanooga with a misdemeanor recovery court. Try to take folks that are earlier in the criminal justice system, that haven't amassed that lengthy criminal record just yet, to hopefully get them out being productive citizens. Right. I've seen people that I've put into this program or that I've been involved in with this program, and I've seen them for the first time. They're in a jail jumpsuit going through withdrawals, just absolute rock bottom. And I've watched people get their kids back who were in state custody. I remember watching one person buy a house.
Yeah.
I watched them get employed. I watched them be productive members of society. And it seems to me that the earlier we can make that happen in a person's life, the better off we all are.
Right. That would help us all, because they become a productive citizen instead of someone who's depending on the government to feed and clothe and house them.
That's right. Yeah. If we can get them out of the criminal justice system and into living a productive life, that's good for them and it's good for the taxpayers.
Right, and that's a good program, good way, because jail's not for everybody.
I think the best way I've heard that put is a friend of mine who was involved in drug court years ago. She had a saying that if you have a car that's broken down and you lock it up in your garage for a year, when you open the garage, the car's still broken down. So just because somebody's in jail, now there are good programs available in some instances in jails, but not everybody takes advantage of those.
Right.
And they don't exist in every jail. And so if we can, just sticking somebody in a cell and leaving them there doesn't solve the root problem. So if we have somebody who's ready and willing to get that help, I want to have a public defender's office that's always ready and eager to provide that help.
Right, because a lot of people that, when I've been involved with jail ministry, you get in there and talk to them, and they burned all their bridges.
Sure.
And they don't have family to go back to. They don't have friends to go back to. They're just kind of out on their own.
And that's why the role of the public defender, that's another reason it's so important, is you have these people who have burned their bridges. And in some cases, the only person that they've got left that's willing to talk to them is a chaplain at a jail, or somebody working in jail ministry, or their own lawyer, you know? And part of working with drug court, I've seen people that have burned all their bridges, and I've gotten to watch them repair those bridges. But they have to get clean first in all of those cases.
And that's a big thing, because across our country, there's millions involved in the drug industry.
That's right. In fact, in the United States last year, there were 100,000 overdose deaths.
Wow.
100,000. It is absolutely a national emergency.
And so we need to really deal with that. I know as I was growing up, people would look at it and say, well, that's their problem. And they'll have to deal with that. And that's not always it's not always the case. It's everybody's problem.
It has become a societal problem in the sense that, if somebody overdoses and dies from a controlled substance, that's horrible. That's a tragedy. But it's not occurring in a vacuum. They're leaving behind orphaned children. They're leaving behind grieving families. So, if I have 3 children and die of a drug overdose, somebody has to take care of those children now. Whereas if we have a program in place that maybe could have helped me get clean, I'd be taking care of my own children.
Right. And that's like I say, more and more. You see more and more of that, and because a lot of times the families who've struggled through a drug problem, they don't the wife or the spouse, whichever it may be, they don't know what to do anymore. They've struggled so far, they're just kind of down on their luck.
And I can think, as I look back over my career, particularly over the past few years when we've had this explosion of fentanyl and drugs have become even more lethal than they already were, I can think of multiple cases where I've had a former client or a current client who's died of a drug overdose, and whose girlfriend or wife had previously died of a drug overdose.
Oh.
So now you have children who have lost both parents to drug abuse. I've seen that happen more than once.
So we need to get a program started.
That's any resource we can get at this point.
Well, that's good. What about other programs you see for the court?
One of the things that I'm particularly passionate about, and that I would like to see implemented, really more than just within this office. So let me back up a little bit and give a little background on the Public Defender's Office and the Public Defender's Conference. So the state of Tennessee has 31 judicial districts. This is the 12th district. There are 31 total. Some districts have 1 county. Some have 6, like we have. Right. Ours is, I think, the second largest in the state, at least by number of counties. I think there's one with 7. So each judicial district has a chief public defender. 29 of them elect public defenders. 2 of them are appointed by their local governments because they pre-exist the state public defender system. And they're all a member of what's called the Public Defenders Conference. There's a DA's conference, there's a judge's conference, there's a public defender's conference. And that conference handles sort of the behind-the-scenes work that enables the lawyers kind of on the ground to do their job. Handles things like HR, information technology, making sure that there's contracts in place to rent office space, providing for legal research materials. So that's something that the conference does. The most visible thing the conference does, at least to the lawyer that's kind of on the ground in the courtroom doing the work, is once a year, the courts all shut down, the trial courts do, and the trial judges go to a training conference, and the DAs go to a training conference, and the public defenders go to a training conference. And see, every lawyer in the state each year is required to have 15 hours of continuing education. And so that's where that's provided. I've been to a number of those now. And in most cases, what it is, we sit around and watch PowerPoints for 3 days. As I mentioned earlier, we have the entire legal profession is dealing with this disappearing jury trial. A jury trial is the most important thing we do. It's also the most complicated thing we do, because it is the last step, the last safeguard protecting somebody's rights who's innocent, who's potentially innocent or is innocent. And it is a complicated procedure. There's a lot to remember. There's a lot going on. There are a lot of moving parts. And the skills that you use in a jury trial are perishable. You know, there's a right and a wrong way to cross-examine a witness. There's a right and wrong way to just tell a story. And that's what you're doing when you're trying a case. And those are perishable skills. And I think we can do a better job of training our lawyers all across the state, across the Public Defenders Conference. There are hundreds of assistant public defenders in this state. And there are 8 assistant public defenders in this district, plus a district public defender, an elected public defender. And I think we can do a better job of making sure those skills stay sharp. You know, at one point I got so frustrated that I actually, with just the lack of training opportunities available to us, I went back to school, back to law school, and I got a Master of Laws degree in trial advocacy specifically from Temple University School of Law, which is the best trial advocacy school in the country. I did that because I wanted to not only be better, but to make sure I had the tools in place to train others to be better. And so one of the things that's nearest and dearest to my heart is I would like to see a more effective training program instituted for our lawyers in the Public Defenders Conference to help make sure they have the skills they need and those skills are being exercised regularly so that they stay sharp.
Right. I hear that a lot from many politicians about the offices they're running, about the training. You know, they want to see more training because a lot of times people get in the offices and then for lack of training, maybe they don't know certain things. And like in your case, of course, with the law, you have to know the law. And if you weren't up on a certain law, that could be detrimental to your client.
That's right. You know, and really, when you're talking about something going all the way to a trial, it's not just the law. It's knowing how to take the law and argue it in a way that's effective both to a judge who's hearing it and also to 12 people who aren't trained in the law. Right. To get it applied in a way that makes sure your client's rights are protected. Right.
So that's the key issue, is protecting your client, and you have to be up on that.
That's right.
It's not like, well, I got my law degree now. I'm a lawyer, so I'm good.
Yeah, they call it the practice of law because you're always getting better. Always getting better.
Well, that's neat. Any other things you'd like to see in the office or in the public defender's office?
You know, I think as I travel around and get to meet people and go from place to place, I've been running for several months now, and we got a few months left of the election. One of the things I think that I would be well suited for is we do a job in the public defender's office that is relatively obscure, but is vitally important to the function of our criminal justice system. And one of the things I really want to be is I want to be an ambassador for that office to the people who make decisions that affect that office. So not just the general public, but even beyond that to county commissioners, county executives, state representatives, state senators. These are all people that make decisions that affect whether the offices have the resources they need to do their job.
Right.
But who may not have a great idea of what exactly that job is.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons, you know, you think back. The fact of the matter is that in this day and age, today in Tennessee, our legislature has a supermajority of conservative Republicans. And I know I've mentioned a couple times that I'm a Republican, but I've been a Republican my entire life. And I think that carries with it a worldview that makes me very well able to talk to decision makers in our government from a way that is the same point of view they have and that they can come from. And so I can say, hey, you know, I can call up my state representative and say, hey, there's this bill pending, and it wants to do something that's really good. It's got a good initiative behind it, but it's going to have some consequences, some collateral consequences on the side that maybe aren't so good. And so, if I'm calling that with the ideological background that I have, if I'm saying those things, I think that it may carry a little more weight than somebody who can't say that. Right. And so that's one of the things that I want to serve as. I want to be a voice for an office that's serving a function that just isn't that well known, but is so important to kind of bridge that gap into the people actually making the decisions that affect how the public defender's office runs.
Right, because if you're not in that job, just like teaching or anything else, if you're not familiar with that job and know the day-to-day routine of that job, and you try to make a decision, you may make a decision that's just not going to work at all.
I am not qualified to make decisions about how teachers teach, right? And if I was making decisions about how teachers teach, I would want the input of teachers. I'd want them to feel comfortable reaching out to me. By the same token, I think it's important to have public defenders who are willing to reach out to their legislators and talk to them, make sure that their legislators know who they are and are able to make informed decisions about legislation that affects the criminal justice system.
That's true. We all need to be informed about what's going on, and I think that's a good thing to be an ambassador, so as you said, to the community and to the state. Well, Ted, is there anything else you'd like to point out before we close?
I think the last thing I would just say is that, as I said, I'm Ted Engel. I'm running as a Republican. I'm a Republican for the 12th Judicial District Public Defender's Office. The primary election is coming up May 3rd. It may well be passed by the time this airs, I know, but it's coming up. But I will be the nominee. I don't have an opponent in the primary, so I'll be on your ballot in August as the Republican nominee for public defender, and I would sure appreciate your support.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Glenn.
And again, as always, you can see our program on BTC Fiber's YouTube page as well as BTC Fiber's Channel 18. And until next time, have a great day. Hey everybody, this is Glenn Edison from Valley Views. We appreciate you watching our shows, and we would like for you to like, share, and follow us on Facebook, as well as like and subscribe to our YouTube page.
Brought to you by Bledsoe Telephone Cooperative, your full-service telecommunications provider right here in the Sequatchie Valley.